Come here. Go this way. Go that way. Go. Nope. Go. Go.
Okay, good. I didn't screw it up too bad.
Stop
Yeah, come
it.
here,
You went all over. Come on.
nice.
Let's go. Go. Go.
All right. I do not know why we don't have a chat, but so goes it. I'm going to stop playing around and screwing this up.
We'll fix that.
Hey.
Here, come right in. And it's not on.
Okay.
So hold up. Let me come right on.
All right, no chat for us. And it looks like a few of the people have gotten back to us. Oh, Rosie. And I will be back in 3 or 4 minutes. Here, you got my word.
You're watching it count out.
Mm.
You're watching it count out. There you go.
Yeah.
No, I'm surprised it's so.
I've gone through so many, like,
That thing is about 15 years old.
wow, maybe I need to get one of
It's the, not only that, we used to use it for the Florida Herbal Conference. So we would run through nonstop, like hundreds of people for 4 days without stopping. Yeah, and so it's unbelievable. And it's usually on. It deserves to die. It has done its job.
Yep, it's all reversed, isn't it? Yes, it is. Awesome. All right, so the board is useless to me. That's all right. What a process.
Anything I do to help you? I mean, I know it's difficult. Anything I can do to make your life better? Did you hear that?
Yes, you can beat the dog here in a little bit.
No, yeah, he's not coming out of there. He runs towards somebody, attacks them with love and
Yeah, that's
I do not mind being packed with love. I used to at home.
We'll
thank
wait.
God you were the first one to walk.
I was gonna say let's wait until everybody gets there and then he'll get a little less
We're not
aggressive in his funness.
I do have friends that get nervous though. Oh my God.
Well, yeah, like nobody should be super happy about a dog that size running towards them, barking. So
If the tail's wagging, I usually figure out I'm in good shape.
Yeah. So I'm gonna open mine as soon as I can, and if I see any questions come through. Okay, is there a way that we can do it? No, I'm saying, can we instruct them to put it into the event post and I'll answer it?
So the only thing I can suggest is could live stream on Facebook.
Well, that's kind of the same thing, is what I'm saying. They can, if they were posting real time in the Facebook event, it would be similar.
So
and then
it'll be sent in the back.
And then I'll answer on your phone. is the best I can, or I'll ask the question and you can say the answer. I'll ask the question, say the answer. That's the way.
There, so or no. Yeah, we got a bunch of people on there.
Try to make sure they
They can. At least I hope so. And there's no way for them to tell me. It's impossible.
well, you need to tell them to shake their heads. Yes.
So there's no way to do it. At least not the way it's set up because I couldn't get the other stuff to work. Don't worry about it. That's all secret. Oh, it's almost that time.
Just trying to do it. So we have to figure out. Right now.
And you can probably put up. You can probably pull it up on, watch it on your computer, even though it's me streaming it. And then you can leave it like that, and you'd be able to see the chat.
Why would I be able to see the chat? Everybody can't see what everybody says to you.
Facebook.
Yeah.
Yes, I think you would be able to see that because it's for everyone. All right, it looks like we've got a decent crowd here. So I'm going to get started here at about 1 minute after. I'm really hoping, I'm embarrassed that the software that we were working with was horrific. And this was my first time trying to do this. So we've got a few of those technical difficulties that are outside my skill set. So we're going to do our very best to just go ahead and use the YouTube live stream rather than the actual event. It looks like at least a crowd of you have figured it out and found us here. So without a doubt, we've got some issues with this that hopefully next time we do this, we'll work it out. And I'll apologize in advance and say, if you've got some specific questions about what we copy, go ahead and email it to me. And I'd say shout it out, but for some reason the chat doesn't work on here either, so it makes it extra challenging. Renee's trying to also follow it on Facebook and may be able to answer, but we're still trying to figure that one out. So extra fun trying to figure all these good things out. But nonetheless, hey, you get what you pay for, right? So no. So if you don't know, I'm Bob Linde. I'm an acupuncture physician and a registered herbalist with the American Herbalist Guild. And I'm one of the co-directors of the Tradition School of Herbal Studies here in sunny St. Petersburg, Florida. Actually, it's kind of cloudy and about to rain, but whatever. We need the rain. So the school's been here for about 20 years now, something like that. And we've got both a Western and Chinese herbal programs, all the way from beginner on through clinician. And so each program has at least, if not longer, a year of clinical practice, kind of the culmination where we have an ongoing student clinic where our senior students are seeing clients on an ongoing weekly evening basis. So they get lots of fun opportunities, and we're in our new classroom that we've just recently acquired this building on a half acre of land here in the main city of St. Petersburg, and we're in the process of creating a tropical teaching garden and ceremony area in the back, which is an ongoing process that's exciting to go from nothing but a sand lot to producing actual fertile soil here in Florida, which is a unique challenge, um, as well as planting all kinds of tropical and subtropical, as well as a few other things that are more familiar, like mugwort and so forth, and yarrow. So ultimately, let's get to the good stuff and talk about why I even bother to do a fairly lengthy free class on herb-drug interactions. And ultimately, when I ran away to acupuncture school a million years ago, I don't even remember when it was. Without a doubt, I was already would call myself an herbalist, not a formal training, but a decent amount of clinical experience at that point. More self-taught and picking up little bits from as many people as I could. But when I got to school and started to create a formal, the intention of a formal practice as a full-time business, and ultimately, I loved the acupuncture stuff, but I knew that the mainstay of my practice was always going to be herbal medicine. And what I saw was so many of the people in acupuncture school, so many of the practicing acupuncturists um, were really sorry. The dog is snorting in the background at us. Uh, that so many of the people were actually frightened to use herbs and somewhat even supplements, even though I'd say there's probably more risk to the supplements. Um, and it was kind of the part of acupuncture school that so many people really struggled with. Shout it out, Renee.
I just want to make sure that you let them know that I can see the comments that are coming through. So
Okay.
if anybody has any questions or if there's a problem, like they can't hear you, just put it into the comments. I don't know if you can see it here, but I'm answering questions on the side of it.
Oh, okay. I can't see those. So
yeah,
rock it. So Renee can answer questions or shout them out for me.
Yeah, like it's
because for some reason I can't see them. So I really saw that one of the biggest roadblocks, the fear that so many of the practitioners or the students had, and ultimately the practitioners, and now that it's been going on for this long, I see more and more people are frightened to use herbal medicine because of their perceived risk of herb-drug interactions. And although I'm biased, but herb-drug interactions do exist. It is something that we need to pay attention to. But my goal here, in a very simplified form, is to create a little bit of language around some of the concerns that people have, some of the misinformation that's out there, and ultimately create some really basic parameters for where the real risks lie, and that a majority of the time we can use it very safely. Oh, let the little puppy out to play. He can stay up here with me.
He won't. That's not about him.
You work the crowd. So, one of the first things that I always like to talk about is when you hear the language herb-drug interactions, we always get this negative image, this bad taste in our mouth, that like fear immediately, like we're going into that fight or flight the second we hear this language. And the reality is I want to change that perception of the way we think about herb-drug interactions and start to embrace the idea that although there are negative herb-drug interactions, what we need to talk about even more is the positive herb-drug interactions. And it's something that's not talked about enough. We're seeing an increasing slowly by minutia. We're seeing an increasing conversation about positive herb-drug interactions. And although it's not an herb, I think it's probably one of the prime examples that more people are familiar with. And that idea of if you take an antibiotic, you should take a probiotic. And that will counteract some of the digestive side effects, the yeast infections, and things like that. And so that's one that the medical community has even embraced at this point, because the research is out there. And one of the problems is the research doesn't exist out there as of yet. So there isn't these voluminous, hundreds of thousand person studies on herb drug interactions that we can start to look at. And so there's a couple of different ways that we think about the herbs themselves. And I'm going to start with some of the roadblocks that we've got to where we fall down as herbalists that we're not doing as well as we can, and that we need to become cognizant of it. And we've got a few of our herb students here. I know there's a bunch of herbalists and herb students watching online. And one of the problems, and whether we're using the language of Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic or energetics of Western herbal medicine, the reality is herbalists tend to use very imprecise languaging. Whereas when we look at the medical model, it's generally fairly precise. If we're talking about anticoagulants and blood thinning kind of ideas, we know that we can go and check the INR, the clotting time of things, and we can get very precise as to how that's affecting stuff. When we say in Chinese medicine, we talk about blood movers. Does that mean that we are thinning the blood? Are we changing the coagulation time? And the reality is sometimes not.
And you guys are welcome to, just like with any class.
And this is Renee over on the other side that you can't.
Questions as you want to.
Yeah, please shout it out.
Just like any other class. I didn't mean to shush you guys. And that's why you're riding on your back bike and didn't want to catcall you, but was like totally going to scream out the window.
That's okay.
Oh, it's okay. It don't matter.
So
nobody knows.
So when we talk about, the immune effects of chi tonics or things that are going to help with stress, does that have a sedative effect? Is that affecting hormones? And the reality is our languaging is imprecise. And we need to recognize that it may give us a potential risk, but it's really just a place to start to pay attention. And as much as, and I'm sure there's some medical folks that are online here with us, the reality is I wish all the medical professionals had a foundation in herbal medicine and understood the parameters of Ayurvedic and Chinese and Western, and that isn't going to happen anytime soon. And we love those folks who are nurses and doctors and so forth out there. We're taking the time to explore herbal medicine and learn more about it, but those are the exceptions rather than the rule. And so ultimately, it becomes our job as herbalists to be able to code switch between the languages. And so that it's an anthropological term, code switching, but it's an idea that, like, yes, we have what we consider a fairly precise language that we use as herbalists of hot, cold, wet, dry, deficient, and excess, tense and lax. And how do we fit that into the paradigm of speaking about a more medical subject with a medical professional? And as a clinician, we need to learn. We need to start to explore how that languaging may come across. And as we see the potential action of the herbs may match a medical potential, then we should explore that there might be some risks. And we'll look at some specific things that we can do in order to minimize our risk of an adverse event with the herbs. Sorry, I have all my stimulants on either side of me. It's great. It's been a long day. Renee and I got up really early this morning, and we were going to look at property actually for a kind of a nature preserve for us as herbalists at a camping/botany area.
I need to break in so that Andor can kind of razz you a little bit.
Okay.
The reason why it was disabled, the live chat, was because the event was marked for kids only. Just letting you know.
I'm still learning.
Right. So I'm glad that we had people like Anne to explain.
We'll get it right next time. Right? Yeah.
Yes, and that she should be here this weekend. We'll employ her to help.
That's right. That's right. So we got up really early this morning. We run out of the house. We have this 2-hour drive to meet with a real estate agent for this 20-acre property in the middle of a swamp, and this beautiful property that we hope to put an offer in. And on the way out, the real estate agent got her car stuck in the huge fishable mud puddles that we called the road on the way out there. And so we got out, and soaking wet. I was dressed like this. I've changed clothes since then. And so we had to like dive into the water and tie our car up and drag it out with our truck. And we were like, yay, we did it after like 30, 40 minutes of work. And then, and then on the way out, she got stuck again, and we couldn't get it out.
We were up to our chins in swamp water.
And so now we're covered with ticks. Luckily, I haven't found any leeches yet, but
we're up to our chin in
hopefully tonight when we're done with this, we'll actually try to put an offer in and get it accepted.
Cleanest she'll ever see me right now.
So it's been a harrowing day. We expected to be back here by 1 o'clock, and we rolled in literally covered with mud about an hour ago trying to set this thing up.
I bathed really well, so I'm good for the next week.
So, yeah.
Don't want to mess up my biome.
So, yeah.
Dirt. It was really good water. It just
we definitely have nourished the probiotics of our external flora today.
That's what we need to know with herb-drug interactions about good
so,
flora and fauna.
One of the, besides our languaging, we also, it's funny, I always tell the story. I had, I wish I could say I was a pharmacist. I'm an herbalist, not a pharmacist. And so I know enough pharmacology to get myself in trouble. And, every time we go out to one of the American Herbalist Guild conferences or something like that, there's usually some really brilliant writer or researcher or naturopath or a pharmacist who gets up and starts talking about receptor sites and the P450, CYP, this and that. And the reality is I actually looked up the definition of what the P450 was, and it was like the wavelength of a beam of light. It made absolutely no sense whatsoever, but I do understand the concept. And so I found out I had these pharmacy students. They just graduated from pharmacy school, and they'd heard about this, and there was like 6 of them coming to this class. And I was terrified. These guys were going to sharpshoot me, and they were going to start. And so I almost started out with saying, like, well, we're not going to talk about how the receptor sites and how the chemicals process. We're not going to talk about the pharmacognosy that much. And they were like, oh my God, we don't know anything about that. We just passed the test. I was like, okay, I feel much better now. And so the reality is how we understand the potential for interaction. It's literally that. We have to go on the potential. And so we can look at the chemistry of it, the pharmacognosy, which is how an herb and a drug.
That's a $5 word.
Yeah, right. Pharmacognosy, geez. Processes through the body. And so whether that's being processed through the liver, the kidney, where it's absorbed through the body, through the intestines. And the reality is we kind of sort of understand how that happens with prescription medications, and we barely understand it when it comes to herbs. And so what happens is when we look at research and the very limited amounts of research that exist, we're trying to isolate a chemical out of an herb and calling that the active constituent. The reality is, on so many of the herbs, there is no active constituent. We like to pull out, and we talk about with St. John's wort, we talk about hypericin, and we talk about silymarin with milk thistle, and those aren't necessarily active constituents so much as marker compounds. And marker compounds is more about quality control, which is a whole other subject we'll talk about ever so briefly. And so we look at how hypericin, a unique chemical that's in St. John's wort, how it processes through the body and what receptor sites it may compete with. But that doesn't necessarily account for the herb that's made up of 10,000 plus chemicals and all of these different constituents that honestly we don't really understand how they're absorbed, how they're processed, and so forth. And so we do the best we can, and we make educated guesses of the potential of it. The problem is if you pull out, if you go to a pharmacy website, some drug company's website, and you go, okay, I want to understand how this drug works. They literally will, not always, but more often than you would suspect, say the mechanism of this drug is not understood. Like literally, they're prescribing these things every day. They're like, meh, we know it works. We did some trials, it's safe. Has a few side effects, or effects, but really we don't know what the hell's happening, but it seems to be working okay, which is like the first time I read that I was like, really? I was shocked. I was just like, I assumed that medicine and pharmacy was such a precise and exact science. The reality is like, man, it's okay. We're doing a good guess. And we're like, we know how it works on the average person, and this range of dosing is generally safe. As long as you don't go too high, too low, and you don't do it on children or special populations of the too old or the compromised. Oh my God, it's terrifying.
Don't use it.
So know that when we look at research, it is iffy at best. And when we look at drugs, and my goal is never to beat up on the drug industry. If I get an infection, I want all the drugs. I want all the antibiotics. I get surgery. I want all the painkillers.
We never want to be shamers, no matter what.
And so we all have a time and a place when we need medications, unfortunately. And let's hope that none of us ever do. So the reality is, most drugs are pretty well researched. You know, they do a pretty good job, and they look at that drug in isolation, and they test it on the most common populations, and they spend millions and millions of dollars to research it. And there's some research that shows what two drugs do together. There's little to no research on 4 or more prescription drugs used together, like goose egg. Many of the medications, and I'll pull out one of my least favorite, acid reflux meds, the PPIs, the proton pump inhibitors. There is zero research past 1 year of use.
If that. Can I argue with
No,
that?
there's like one study.
Yeah, can I argue with that a little bit? I don't know if you'll be able to hear me.
Well, come on over here. This is Renee, the other co-director who primarily teaches the Western program.
That's very important. The whole Prilosec thing is very important for, I want to say that I am old. I have been an herbalist forever.
Wait a second, I'm older than you.
Yeah, that is true. I am old. I've been an herbalist forever. And when something that we can get over the counter now, like Prilosec, when it first came out 20 years ago, there was a study for a maximum of 2 weeks that you could not be on it any longer than 2 weeks, according to the study.
The directions, yeah.
And I was in charge of 3 people who had it prescribed to them indefinitely for their whole entire lives. And there never was a study past 2 weeks as to what it would do for nutritional deficiencies inside of the body.
There is no. Yeah.
And they didn't care. The other thing that we need to add to that is the number one growing demographic that's being put on that is infants in the hospital at birth. And so it's something to think about when we have all these nutritional deficiencies and
we'll get into those.
Okay. All right. I'm just saying, like, it's a big thing that just because we can get it over the counter now doesn't mean it didn't used to be a prescription, and it's something that we need to look at. The studies never got any better.
So one of the concerns is when we've got people who are on 5, 10, 15, 20 prescription medications. So far, I think my record's 24 prescription medications somebody was on.
I'm 32.
32? Oh, heck yeah, that's what I'm talking about. My 24-year-old was in her either late 20s or early 30s and wanted to have a child. Needless to say, those drugs would not have been safe with pregnancy, and certainly not in that combination. So there is zero research at looking at that many prescriptions. Anything over 4, there's nothing. We're making our best guess. When we start to throw in things like food, supplements, water, and certainly herbs, we're looking at this collection of this combination of chemicals that literally there's no predicting what's going on. Oddly, the little small studies that we see, properly prescribed herbs tend to reduce the adverse events of the multi-pharmacy. And that's surprising. We're adding a new chemical in, or set of chemicals in. You would think there's an increased risk. But we tend to have a safer approach when not through Dr. Google, but good energetics or good, training, that we're able to add herbs or combinations of herbs together. Yeah.
Is it because, like the herbs that are being prescribed to her or given are really working on the main root causes of things?
There's many reasons.
So the question was like, how come? That seems like crazy talk. And so is that going to the root cause rather than symptom suppression is her question. And I would say it depends, because we do take herbs sometimes for symptom suppression. Like there's without a doubt. Our goal as herbalists is to have a system of evaluation of understanding where somebody's imbalance, and like, yay, energetics. I'm all about the energetics, whether it's Western or Chinese. That allows us to see how the body's out of whack, either too much of something or not enough of something. And so we're not prescribing, we're not recommending those herbs to correct a symptom so much as an imbalance of the body and trying to bring back that concept of homeostasis. And I think it's because we are trying to create balance rather than suppress something else that we see an improvement, because if those drugs are creating a lack of homeostasis in the organism, but suppressing a symptom, which if my back hurts, that's what I want. But it's not correcting my spinal misalignment or ruptured disc or whatever. So if we're able to create that homeostasis, I think we see that reduction in improvement of overall satisfaction of the person.
And even though you were very doctory about this and we're talking about pharmaceuticals, I also believe that there's a sentient value to
their magic.
And that we don't actually know. Like, I believe that they're intuitive. I believe that the 10,000 plus phytochemicals each plant has allows them to make decisions that instead of this doing this one thing, it can decide to weave around or to move or to push or to pull back. Where when you have a single chemical constituent, it can't do that. It only does this. Yeah. So I do believe that the plants come at it a different way.
That was my next question. Is more so, do you like the synergistic aspect of like the nature, whether it's the plant specifically or the herbs, is what contributes also to the.
I do.
Yeah. So the question was, like what is it about the plant versus just a chemical constituent or an herb coming out of there? And there's some really interesting examples, and I think nettles, mullein, and a few of the other ones. That he will lick your tea over there. This is Cody. We'll put him on camera later. 100 pounds of love. So there's some examples that we talk about when people harvest medicine. Sometimes we harvest medicine to make this. Oh, we're going to make some elderberry syrup for everybody, and that becomes a very generic kind of thing. And somebody puts their thought and intention in, and that's awesome. But when we go out and we harvest medicine for an individual, I need this for this person, and I need this medicine to do that. There's a very real argument that if we ask the plant if it can help with that it will alter its chemistry in order to create the balance that we need for that individual. And that's going way down the rabbit hole. So I'm going to get back on that. So yes is my short answer.
It's not entirely understood even by the pharmaceutical, right. Like we don't quite know.
So that one of the other things that we look at is quality control. And, as an herbalist, as a teacher, I think it's really important that I follow not just the herbal industry and understand all of the issues that we deal with within our industry. And we've got issues, let me tell you. The industry needs counseling. No, I'm just kidding. But I also feel like I need to follow the medical industry and specifically the pharmaceutical industry. As new drugs come out, as issues come up, as there's recalls, new side effects that are being discovered about particular drugs, I need to recognize those so I can see them and educate my clients and also the students. And so about 15 years ago, I was listening to the keynote speaker of one of the big pharmacy conferences, and they were talking about the issues that the pharmaceutical industry was facing going into the 21st century. The number one thing that they were looking at and were concerned with was quality control and adulteration of the pharmacy stream. That there were, and we see it in the paper on a regular basis. So sometimes it's a recall where the drug isn't the right amount, that the drug isn't there, that there's bacteria or fungus. We hear about and some horrifying individual stories where, like, there was an oncology doc who was diluting the chemotherapy he was doing for people in IVs somewhere up in like Michigan or something like that. And so there's some really horrid stories. And as new drugs come out, as the population increases, and so sure, we've got plenty of metformin for diabetes, and we've got lots of the very mainstream top 25, top 100 medications. But as we discover unique diseases and treatments for them and see obscure diseases where only a couple thousand people in the whole world have this disease, where do we find the medications for those folks? And so we don't go to the primary manufacturers. We have to go to maybe the less than ideal suppliers of that. And the quality starts to go down. Those may or may not be FDA inspected labs that were inspected in the last 50 years, if at all. And so it's an issue in the pharmaceutical industry, and it is a very real issue in the herbal industry. So quality control is paramount when we work with herbs. And there's a couple things for us to look for. There's two terms. It won't do any good to write it on the board, but CGMP, which is current good manufacturing practices, which basically the FDA and the federal government tells us this is how you're supposed to make stuff. And this is based on DSHEA. And DSHEA was a law that was passed by Congress in 1974. Maybe no, yeah, 1974. And basically by the 2001 or so, all people manufacturing any herbal product had to meet the DSHEA quality control standards, which is what helped to form the United States CGMP. Yeah.
Products.
Yes, current good manufacturing products. Yes, and the DSHEA was Dietary Supplement Health Education Act.
Not process, good manufacturing process.
Yeah, one of those. So basically what it says, it tells. Yeah. See if I actually. I usually have slides for this. And I was like,
capital DSHEA. It will come up. Okay. And you guys learn this in school. Oh. Like I do a whole like
this is just for the masses, and
you want to shoot yourself.
I think everybody needs to see
you
it
know
a
your
lot.
laws, and you know how to like I make you label properly, and then I make you sell yourself out with as a group so that you get used to not being afraid to do it and being like, no, I know my
So right. I know online you guys can't see this, but Dietary Supplement Health Education
I'm writing
Act,
it all in, Bob. Okay.
And C is current GMP, good manufacturing process or product.
I put it in.
So basically it says it's very specific of your labeling and your point size and all of that. And
can't be below a 9, which all the time it is.
So I have to buy special glasses to read supplement bottles.
You have to be able to see.
But
the sick person has to be.
The most important part of it is what it says is on the label has to be in the bottle. Guess what? There's some shady SOBs out there who lie, and they lace it with pharmaceutical drugs, all kinds of crap. And so a product that is laced with a pharmaceutical drug is illegal and does not meet the letter of the law. So we get beat up as an industry a lot because guess what? There's some products out there that are illegal and they're sold on the market. You can buy them in the gas station or at the Asian market and so forth. And it's funny. This goes back to that good and bad herb-drug interaction. And I'm going to beat up on China a little bit, even though I'm a Chinese herbalist. In China, they'll take a sinus herbal formula and put it in with an antihistamine. And you know what? It works really well. And they can use a subclinical dosage of the antihistamine and a moderate. And so it's great. And it's normal. And like, I don't care. I just want my sinuses to stop blowing snot everywhere. So the reality is there. Everybody knows it. It's okay. It's legal. And then when you have the Asian market down the street brings in a suitcase full of that to sell it at their market, And here, the Americans don't know it, and you have adverse events to the usual antihistamine, or it sedates you too much. You're already on got low blood pressure, and you're operating the space shuttle. It might be an issue. And so we could say, oh no, that's a great herbal formula. It happens to use it over the counter. Or we could say that's illegal, and it is illegal here in the US. So in general, you're getting the short version of our weekend long course here on all of this. The FDA is charged with enforcing that. They actually have enforcement rights now, and they do utilize it. We just had a case in Bradenton, across the bay here in Florida. Somebody was selling the was it MMS? Mm-hmm. And the FDA stormtroopers went in with M16s and kicked in the door and arrested them because they didn't stop making medical claims about a not herbal product. In general, we find that weight loss, muscle building, sexual enhancement,
those are the ones.
Those are the anti-cancer, anti-aging. Those are the ones that are most likely to be laced. And I'll give you a great example. I think it was called 7 Flowers Formula. And I had a client of mine, and she was dealing with insomnia and sleep. And usually that's pretty easy. And just we're not having great success with her sleep issues. And we're like, rrr. And I'd run through a couple formulas with her, not a whole lot of improvement. And she also was seeing a chiropractor, which is awesome. And the chiropractor gave her a supplement that was called, I believe it was 7 Flowers, which was this ancient Chinese secret formula. And she came in the next day after seeing him. She was like, this formula is amazing. I don't know what's in it, but I slept for 16 hours.
I'll tell you what's not in it.
An herb. Yeah. So I was like, I've got some really good herbs. There's some awesome supplements out there, L-theanine, all these other cool things that might knock you out and get you a good night's sleep. But if somebody goes from just intense, horrible insomnia to 16 hours of sleep, might be laced with something, and I'd never heard of it. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to look up these herbs. I knew one of them. And not to say I know every herb in the sun,
but we do.
But I know a lot of herbs, and I researched it, and I looked up, and I wrote the company, and I basically found their website. It was a little shady. And I was looking for, like, give me opinion, a Chinese name, give me a Latin name, let me do a little investigation. I was like, I have this client who has multiple chemical sensitivities. I really need to know the Latin names of these plants. And they were like, it's all here on the website. And I'm like, no, it's not. That's not a Latin name. So there's a lot of common names and some Chinese names, and there was nothing I could find on the internet. So I went to there's a lot of resources of professional herbalists out on the internet. And I was like, hey, has anybody ever heard of this product? And I got a private email from an herbalist who I was actually familiar with, who said, yeah, I sent that out for lab testing. There's 2 subclinical dosages of prescription meds, but it works so well, I use it anyway.
Oh, Lord. Oh,
wow.
Hey, I was horrified.
Their clients don't know.
And like nobody knows. I actually turned that company into the FDA. Because if we don't police ourselves, when we know a product is laced with something shady, then they're going to police us, and we're not going to like what that looks like. And so right now, woohoo, it's the Wild West. We can kind of do whatever the heck we want. They're choosing not to enforce a lot of those DSHEA laws from those herbalists who are making small batch formulas, even though they reserve the right to. If any of y'all are making like a couple of a gallon or 2 of elderberry syrup for your friends and neighbors, you should meet CGMP, all of the standards the FDA set out for you. But luckily, they're not choosing to enforce that on our small manufacturers. And small is also undefined. Yeah.
Is that an issue when you are giving something to your family, or not just selling?
Selling's where the issue is. And I will tell you that the primary way that the FDA chooses to enforce these laws is on the internet.
And remember, I teach you how to do it.
Yeah, well, this will in class. This will be a way greater detail of all of this. Let me get back on the herb drug interactions.
Yep.
So
literally teach you how to do it.
The reality is, we need to ensure that we have good quality products, because if we have a product that's laced with a pharmaceutical drug and we're taking that with another pharmaceutical drug that's been prescribed by a doctor, we have no idea what the hell's going to happen, because we're not a pharmacist. We're not educated to enough depth to recognize drug-drug interactions outside of typing it into drug.com or rx.com. Yeah.
We don't want to know.
So, and you would be doing potential harm and working well outside of our our ability to do anything that's reserved for the MDs to prescribe those medications. And it's an illegal product. So ensuring quality control is important. There's also issues of being laced with pesticides, arsenic, lead, mercury, all kinds of other creepy stuff. So one of the things that we should insist on from our suppliers is what's called a C of A certificate of analysis, where somebody somewhere, ideally in an independent lab here in the US, has done their due diligence checking to ensure that the marker compound is there. And so this is done with chromatography, and there's different types of chromatography. And it's like if you ever watch like NCIS and they put the sample into the thing and it comes out with all these peaks and valleys, and they're like, look, it's the blue ring octopus that killed them. That's chromatography. It's just they're doing it particularly well. So, come on, I love me a good Agatha Christie with a blue ring octopus bite. So we're looking to ensure that the product that we say is in the bottle is in the bottle. And so that goes back to that silymarin, ensures that what we're working with is milk thistle, the St. John's wort, and every product has a unique marker compound. What happens is this is used as a marketing tool rather than a quality control test. And so does 15% hypericum in your St. John's wort ensure that it's better than 10% hypericum? The problem is hypericum doesn't show any benefit for nerve inflammation or for melancholia or depression. The herb St. John's wort does. This is only a chemical that is unique to it. So what happens is they either artificially will boost the marker compound. They'll put it on there as a marketing ploy that has nothing to do with the efficacy of the product. And so we need to recognize when it's an actual constituent that is universally held to be bioactive for an issue versus this just telling us that that product's there.
Just said so much.
Leave it to me. I have the $5 words there. So we need to ensure that it is the product that it says, and then we need to make sure that it, as a minimum, meets the FDA's piss poor standard of heavy metals, arsenic, lead, pesticides, fungus, and so forth. At the moment, and I could be wrong, yay, electrical storms are coming. Hopefully our internet connection will not go down. Right now, I believe Germany has one of the highest standards in the world. So every company has a good manufacturing practice set of laws and standards. China and India do not have the highest standards. Let's just say that. So just because something that says it meets the CGMP, if they don't tell you what country CGMP it is, you may not be getting it minimum of the US standard. If somebody says we meet the German good manufacturing practices, we're like, oh, you kick butt. Germany, I think Australia is pretty high. I haven't checked anything lately of like who's number one. But Germany is considered to have one of the higher standards. Yeah.
Is that really because of like funding? Is that because
that's the DEA?
So I'll go down a rabbit hole there.
Yeah.
Those countries that have universal health care utilize herbs in their medical system. And so things like St. John's wort and elderberry and so forth are part of the pharmacy of England and Germany. So they have to do more research to back it up. It's funny, one of the most conservative tomes on herbal stuff that no herbalist worth a hoot actually utilizes is the the German
E-Commission.
Yeah, German E-Commission. Thank you. That's brain cramp. The German E-Commission. So back in the 70s, 80s, I forget when it was, they went and said, all right, here's all these people making claims about herbs. Let's find out what we can bring into the medical system in Germany and show me the research. And so things like elderberry were brought in because, like, no, there is no doubt in our mind the safety of it as well as the efficacy of it was far superior to pretty much anything they had. So boom, that came in. Other things like, I can't even think of anything. St. John's wort came out in mixed reviews, so they didn't necessarily put that in. So you always can say that if the German E-Commission says that this works, there is no doubt in my mind that it works.
No buttholes about it. The other thing is that their ability to do experiments, to do studies, is not hindered like ours is, because ours is centered around making money, and they're not allowed to basically make money. They don't have pharmaceutical companies the way that we do. And so they don't have any reason to not lie about it, to not tell the truth about it. And so they have a different, Israel is one of them, Iran.
Yeah, there's a lot of good research.
Really way better studies.
When we look at research outside the U.S., there's definitely, and I would say Europe is a little iffy too. There's no shortage of money in pharmaceutical industries there. But Iran has some interesting research.
Australia,
the Soviet Union, I guess it's not that anymore. It's Russia, isn't it? Russia, Turkey, Israel, all Cuba, France, all have some more extensive herbal research. That, not to say they're not biased as well. China, certainly, in Japan, all of them are. Every researcher's biased. Everything I'm telling you is biased. I'm an herbalist. I think our stuff rocks, and so And sorry, that's actually part of the same conversation. When we read stuff, recognizing both the researcher and the articles that we read, they're biased. If you're reading a herbal journal, guess what? We think herbs kick ass. They're super effective, super safe. We're horribly biased. In the same sense, there is the U.S. media in particular doesn't seem to like our industry, and I'm not sure why. We like them. Well, well, that's true too.
And they pay for big ads.
So here's the weird thing: Consumer Reports, right? No advertising. And Consumer Reports is like, no, I want to buy a washer and dryer or a car. I go to Consumer Reports. I'm going to look at that. We think of that as they go through a rating system and they compile this information, and they're technically not influenced by that industry, except in the herbal industry. They seem to have taken it upon themselves to create some yellow journalism. Yeah, I can talk yellow journalism to that. So I'm not sure why. There was a great thing that came out way too long ago that basically said these like 10 deadly herbs and supplements, and there's a number of Chinese herbs in there. One that was on there was plantain, Plantago officinalis. And the problem was that back in the 70s, before we really had a lot of chromatography and quality control standards, somebody who must have been working with another herb and maybe smoking it, somehow made the mistake of harvesting germander and selling that as plantain as a wild crafter, and a bunch of people had some issues with that. So because there was an adulteration 50 years ago in the herbal stream, right? So our wholesalers, that now forever plantain is labeled as a dangerous herb with potential liver toxicity, which is ridiculous. No drug would be on the market. No food would be on the market. Take all the spinach out. Take all the bean sprouts out. All of those at one point had an issue. All the melons, right? No, somebody made a mistake. We correct the flaw in our system and tell people to wash their hands, and you're fine. And now we have chromatography and we have better testing. So the problem is they published this headline of like these deadly herbs, and some of them were either like, really, you're bending the truth. Some of them were just outright lies and mistakes, and they were called on it. The retraction was 2 months later in microscopic print on the last page, rather than saying, hey, we really screwed up and we want to keep our people to believe that we are always upfront and honest about our stuff. So we need to recognize some of the issues with where we're sourcing our material, and those are pros and cons. And too often we're having to defend ourselves. As you see media reports, which tend to be very negative, unfortunately, one of my favorite sources is the American Botanical Council. And it's Herbalgram. I always forget whether it's .com or .org, but they tend to mark whatever Mark's last name is. I can't think of his name. He is wonderful. He's always, when you read the article and on the very last paragraph they give the counterpoint from our industry, it will always be a quote from the American Botanical Council. And so they tend to, somewhat biased in our favor, but they will give you the counterpoint. A couple of years ago, we saw in New York that there was a bunch of the herb companies as well as supplement companies that were forced to take their products off the shelf because they said none of the stuff that they say is in here is in here. The problem was they were selling extracts and they were testing for DNA. And
an extract's not going to have any lead.
Yeah, the extracts have pieces of DNA, but don't actually have full strands because it's not a ground up leaf. And so basically the American Botanical Council went, you idiots. And yet those companies were forced to close temporarily and pull all of those herbal products off their shelves for a period of time. And it's really sad because whether you like that company or not doesn't matter. But the reality was it was a really bad job from a prosecutor and some really stupid scientists who I just have to assume were either poorly educated or bribed.
What we learn in our first year junior college statistics class is that we can make numbers say anything.
Yeah.
To know and how we work in school, that I make you guys taste every single herb is to start to break down that way you can legitimately, which we have to do continuously, break open supplements, and if it doesn't smell and taste like what you know that plant to smell and taste, you can legitimately be like, no, you're wasting your money.
And so we said chromatography, blah, 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 blah. The reality is it's $100,000 for one of those machines. I'm fresh out this week and I don't have any connections at the college. So there is really another $5 word, organoleptic testing.
Yep.
Organoleptic testing is really fancy talk that says, looks like mint, smells like mint, tastes like mint, must be mint. That is a valid form of evaluation. Like in the same way that we have a sommelier can sip or smell a fine wine and tell you where, when, how it was grown and harvested and so forth.
Often are like herbal bloodhounds.
Where as an herbalist, we should be able to do that. And most of you would, if I put a cup of quality mint tea in front of you,